Thanks very much, Catherine, to the Premier, the Opposition Leader, parliamentarians present, and thank you to Hamilton and Melinda for the invitation. When Professor Dean Jench, Emeritus Professor Jench, who has been covering elections in this state for 55 years, literally, when he says that he has no idea what's going to happen on March the 17th, then I don't know who does. Apart from perhaps from Sportsbet, and I'm not sure what odds they're offering at the moment. Support, maybe someone can tell me, although the irony is not lost on me that the betting in Hartley seems to be fairly heavy, although I suggest the odds should be a bit longer for me than they actually are, given the preference deal that I understand the major parties will be doing in Hartley to try and squeeze me out. It seems that I believe in bringing people together. I never thought I'd bring the Labor and Liberal parties together in their disdain for me, so I must be doing something right. Support for the major parties has been in steady decline for more than 25 years. Not that long ago, the Labor and Liberal parties could rely on primary vote support in the order of 40% each. Who knows what it'll be at the next election? I think conservatively it'll be in the order of about a third each. Both Labor and the Liberals still aspire to majority government on the basis of support that is very far from a majority, but those aspirations are looking more and more dubious. We will know the outcome of the March 17 election in due course, I suspect not on the night of the 17th, but an environment where no one political party may be close to a majority, minority governments and power sharing may well be the new political norm. This isn't actually a new thing. Early in South Australia's political history, minority governments and shifting parliamentary coalitions were commonplace. In the first 36 years of responsible government in this state, no less than 47 governments, I'm not suggesting we go down that path, and yet there was progressive political reform, prosperity and remarkable economic progress, some would say, despite the politicians. We may be moving into a new phase of political life in which power sharing and negotiation will be the new foundations of public policy. Some of those who are beneficiaries of the current political order, those currently holding ministerial and parliamentary seats and their party machines and aspirants for ministerial positions, may find this prospect unnerving and will warn of all sorts of trouble to come. As a person in the middle of the political spectrum, however, I am an optimist. Power sharing and negotiation may well afford new opportunities for parliamentary reform and efforts to enhance the accountability of executive governments and transparency in decision making. In an environment where no one party can enforce its diktat, political processes may of necessity be more focused on negotiation, compromise and real policy debate rather than aggressive partisan confrontation. I am hopeful that my party, SA Best, will play an important role in bringing about a new political paradigm in South Australia. If successful in securing the balance of power in the South Australian Parliament, the SA Best team will be pushing for deep reform to ensure more responsible, transparent and accountable government. We must fix our system of government and governance if we are to fix our state's many problems. I believe South Australian parliamentarians need to work much harder and efficiently to deliver the progress that our state desperately needs. I want the rocking horse to become a workhorse. At the top, we need a more focused executive. South Australia's cabinet comprises 14 ministers. South Australia's constitution currently allows for the appointment of up to 15 ministers and 2 parliamentary secretaries. When our state's current constitution was adopted in 1934, the number of ministers were limited to 6. Premier Tom Playford oversaw the state's industrial transformation with just 6 and later only 8 ministers. However, in the decades that have followed, owing to the growth of government and the desire of successive premiers to find jobs and rewards for political allies, it's exploded. There's been an explosion in the number of ministerial appointments and titles. The Premier Weatherall's cabinet of 14 ministers hold between them no less than 58 ministerial positions. One minister has as many as 9 ministerial positions. Some government departments report to as many as 5 different ministers. This complexity erodes ministerial responsibility and leads to administrative confusion. SAB strongly favours a much smaller, more focused and less costly government executive, and I believe it is possible. If we look at what in Tasmania, the smallest state, but they've managed to cope with 8 ministers under successive Labor and Liberal administrations. Ministerial titles should be limited to at most 1 or 2 for each minister. Government departments and agencies should report to only 1 minister. Parliamentary secretary positions seem to be of little value, and the prospect of a smaller executive should cause both Mr Weatherill and Mr Marshall to look closely at the Cabinet and Shadow Ministry and ask themselves who is really performing well enough to remain on the front bench. And in the longer term, I think we need to seriously consider a smaller, leaner parliament and to have 4-year terms for the Legislative Council. 8 years is a very long period of time, and I think that the members of the Legislative Council should face the will of the people at the same time as the House of Assembly. So it's all in and all out at that time. We want the Parliament to have a more robust process of dealing with issues. Having been in the Federal Parliament for almost 10 years, I noticed that one thing, the estimates process, where you can grill public servants, where you can grill those ministers responsible for spending public money, is much more rigorous than it is at a state level. About 5 days here, there is a Budget and Finance Committee as well, but it's not the same, and I think we need to have that greater rigour. I think there's also a strong case for better oversight of government decisions and actions. We want the Auditor-General to significantly have a greater oversight role in government expenditure and administration, to look at outcomes as well, about the efficacy of government measures. The Auditor-General does good work, but much more work should be done to make both government finances more transparent and ensure that taxpayers get value for money. We also need to have much greater expertise, independent expertise on health policy and administration. Early today, I was at the Modbury Hospital with the independent member for Florey, Francis Bedford, and along with a number of SA-Best candidates, where we want to restore the high dependency unit there, something that the Liberal Party supports, the government does not. But SA-Best believes that a Royal Commission to conduct a root and branch review of South Australia's health system would be a good thing in terms of how we can get better outcomes. The fact that you have to wait 6 years for orthopaedic surgery at the Lyell McEwen Hospital in some cases is simply unacceptable. And more broadly, SA-Best supports strong protections and encouragement for whistleblowers who reveal corruption or malpractice within government. Sharon Olsen was the nursing director for a brief period of time of the Oakden facility back in 2007. She approached me when the Oakden scandal broke. She is a highly respected nurse. She has taught at Flinders University in recent years. She was the nursing director and she wrote reports, and she's given evidence in a Senate inquiry where she's had the protection of parliamentary privilege. She basically warned her superiors that Oakden was a disaster waiting to happen because of what she observed. And eventually, she says that she still is troubled. It troubles her that she left and went back to Glenside, where she had a senior position, because she couldn't get anywhere. She wanted to speak out, but she feared that she would lose her job. She feared repercussions, and she even feared a jail term in terms of legislation that talks about a 2-year jail period. That's an extreme, obviously, set of circumstances, but people like Sharon Olsen should be free to speak out if they see maladministration, bad practices within government, without fear of losing their careers. And that's why strong whistleblower protection reform will strengthen the culture of the public service, empower public servants to come forward where things are going wrong. And the fact that Nev Kitchen, the General Secretary of the PSA, spoke out with me on this issue is, I think, very comforting that rank and file public servants want this. I just want to speak briefly about the issue of the economy, and to paraphrase James Carville, the campaign manager for Bill Clinton, it's the economy, stupid. And that is very telling here in South Australia. Last month's report from the SA Centre for Economic Studies, Development Strategy for Reinventing South Australia, is very salutary and sobering reading, and Associate Professor Michael O'Neill and his team have actually done a very good and considered work that I think should be mandatory reading for anyone who's concerned about the future of the state. The fact that our population is in decline in terms of the number of young people that are here, the fact that we have the weakest population growth on the mainland of the states is very worrying. The ratio of number of workers employed relative to the retired population in South Australia in 1982 was 5.3 to 1, and in 2014 had declined to 3.5 to 1.15, much worse than comparative figures in the other states. Our population trends show that in 36 years, while South Australia has increased by 382,000 in population, the number of young people, those 18 to 34, has actually declined by 25,000 in total terms. How can that be? For those parents out there who have a son or daughter who's moved interstate because they can't find a job here, for those who are 18 to 35-year-olds in the room who know of their mates who've gone interstate, these are salutary matters that we must address. I make this point. If we grow the state's economy in an orderly way, not as a chemistry experiment, which I think the Premier quite rightly said, if Melbourne's growing at 140,000 a year, I'm not suggesting that at all, these would be the implications for the great state's gross state product. The Australian population grew by 41.8% between 1989, 90 and 2015-16, compared to South Australia's 19.7% increase. Assuming a consistent increase in economic activity, if we had the same growth rate as the rest of the country, our current price GSP per person would have been $56,680, and it would have been, our economy would be $16 billion bigger than it actually is now. These are the sorts of things we need to look at in the long term. There must be formal evaluation of budget initiatives, policy and program evaluation that is rigorous, and SA Best is all about that. I just want to comment on one thing, because we talk about economic issues, but social issues are important too. The scourge of crystal meth, amphetamine, and I think all of us agree what an awful, evil drug that is. I spoke at a recent Real Estate Institute forum, and I'm about to be wrapped up. One of the auctioneers there made a point that in regional communities that have actually noticed the number of foreclosures has increased where they believe it is crystal meth related. So social issues are important, and they also have awful human consequences, and they also impact on our economy more broadly. I'm looking forward to the forum in a few minutes' time. Thanks very much.